But a chair is not a house, and a house is not a home when there's no one there. Shut up and sing with Heather. Hi, welcome to Shut Up and Sing with Heather. I'm Heather, your professional voice teacher, here to give you some helpful hints and tricks to make you the best singer you can be. Today, we're going to be talking about articulation. Articulation is how you hit a note, or how you first make that articulation to the note. There are three types of articulation for singing. There's balanced onset articulation, there's glottal articulation, and then in contemporary singing there's something called breath articulation. Okay, so let's learn about these three types of articulation. The first one is balanced onset. Balanced onset is when the vocal cords start vibrating and the air starts moving all at the same time. And essentially there's no pop or anything at the beginning. The sound just seems to happen. That's balanced onset articulation. And that should be your standard articulation, the one that you use most of the time. The second one that we use in our order is glottal articulation. Glottal articulation is when the vocal cords come together, the air starts coming up, builds up a little puff of air, and then they kind of pop open. And we get a little bit of pop right at the beginning there. That's our glottal articulation. Now, we hear a lot of glottal articulation in musical theater because making sure that everyone can understand the words is the most important thing. So we find that a lot of musical theater singers like to sing like this. We get a lot of glottal articulation. There's nothing wrong with glottal articulation, but if it's done excessively, you might find that you become very fatigued. It's a lot of working out for the voice. Classical singers, they use glottal articulation as well, but generally not as much as musical theater or pop singers. Now, the thing that I call the breath articulation, and this is kind of a contemporary vocal technique term, the breath articulation is when we get a lot of air in the articulation. You can hear air moving. Classical singers never use this articulation, and musical theater singers might use it sometimes for a type of color. I use the big umbrella of pop music. Other contemporary singers are the most likely to use this kind of breath articulation. We certainly hear it in a lot of contemporary pop singers. They will utilize this kind of breath articulation. Think of that as a color, different colors that we want to use in the sound. Now, I want to give you some examples of our balanced onset versus our glottal articulation. I've chosen a song today that some of you may be familiar with, but not everyone. It's a song from the 60s by Burt Bacharach called A House Is Not a Home, but it became popular in Glee a couple years ago because it was in there. But I think it's a really good example because glottal articulation generally happens when we start with a word that starts with a vowel. So I think that in a lot of these types of ballads, we need to be very, very conscious of when we're using glottal articulation. I always say that in my singing ninja approach, I call it, you always want to be crystal clear as to what every decision is that you're making. So if you've chosen to do a glottal articulation, that's fine, but just know you're doing it. After that, everything should really be balanced onset. So you may be familiar with this line here. It goes, but a chair is not a chair, and a house is not a home. Okay, so that's the line right there. And now what if I sing it with a lot of glottal articulations? So just listen to this. But a chair is not a home, and a house is not a home when there's no one there. I don't think it's nearly as pretty with the glottal articulation. But what I encourage you to do is to go and try out these glottal articulations and then try to be very, very aware of when you're using them, because it can be very difficult for some people to take them out. So let's hear it again without any glottal articulations. Remember, this song is a ballad. Okay, we want to have nice, beautiful line in this song. If you were doing an audition with a ballad, that's what we'd be listening for, is that you have a beautiful line with it. So let's listen to it one time without any glottal articulation, just balanced onset. But a chair is not a house, and a that's my preference right there. But the big thing is for you to be incredibly aware of what type of articulation you're using. If I listen to a singer who's using too much glottal articulation, I'm tired just listening to them, and I know they're going to be tired after doing all of that singing. Particularly if you're doing a lot of musical theater chorus, I find that those students do a lot of glottal articulation, mostly because the director's saying, I can't hear you, I can't understand you. And so they're overdoing it because they're good kids. That translates into solo singing not as well. The takeaway is for you to be incredibly aware of what type of articulation you're using. So I really recommend the balanced onset should be our main articulation that we use, and then the other ones are used for color and necessity. So I hope that's helpful. If you think so, please like and subscribe this video. Give us some comments below and let us know what you've been wanting to know about singing, and I'll do my best to answer that in another video. This has been Heather with Shut Up and Sing. Now I want you to stop talking and get out there and sing.